If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. I'm Katherine Hansen, and I'm happy to be back for another show. I hope you find this podcast to be a valuable resource in your recovery from binge eating disorder, bulimia, and any form of binge eating. Even if you don't engage in binge eating specifically, many of the ideas shared here also apply to compulsive overeating, emotional overeating, and many other harmful behaviors surrounding food and weight. Today's topic will help you with many of the habits and urges you may be struggling with, and I hope you come away from this episode feeling more confident to break free. Brain Over Binge coach Julie is here to talk about what she calls urge loops. You'll learn what that means, why it's so important to learn to recognize urge loops, and how to get out of any destructive loops you may be in right now. Before I share this conversation with Julie, I want to say that if you're new here and you want to learn more about Brain Over Binge and you want to get started ending the binge eating habit, you can get my free ebook, The Brain Over Binge Basics. This ebook contains the fundamentals of this approach, which will help give you a background to get the most out of these podcast episodes. You can get this ebook when you sign up for my monthly newsletter and encouraging emails, and you can do that right in the show description or at brainoverbinge.com right on the homepage. Thanks again for being here, and I hope you find this discussion practical and inspiring. Hi, Julie. It's so good to have you here again.
Hi, Katherine. I'm so happy to be back.
So today we're going to talk about something that is really important to you as you coach your clients and as you coach in the Brain Over Binge group, and that is something that you call urge loops. And I'm super excited to dive into what that means and how that is going to help the listeners in recovery.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
Yeah, so can we get started by just explaining what is an urge loop?
Yeah, sure. So this is a term I've created kind of to describe the whole cycle of a binge, and that it's not just urges to binge that come up for people. My clients think that it is, but urges come in all these different ways, and it's all part of the same cycle. And so I've started calling it kind of a loop. So there's the urge to binge, there's the urge to purge or compensate in some way, there's the urge to restrict, there's the urge to beat yourself up, there's the urge to fixate on weight, there's the urge to frantically seek out solutions and programs and fixes. There's the urge to replay what went wrong over and over and over again. There's the urge to micromanage food. There's the urge to tell yourself that if you're kind to yourself through the process, you'll keep doing it. There's the urge to be perfect. There's the urge to say, I've already blown it, I might as well. There's the urge to compare your journey to someone else's or compare your size and shape to someone else's. There's the urge to say you're broken. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on and on all day. There are so many. And I came up with this idea of an urge loop because it's almost like it's spinning and spinning and spinning, and it can take all these different formats. But I think in recovery, people really think the only thing they should be anticipating is this urge to binge. And it's not that way.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think if you follow those urges, like you talked about, the urge to restrict, maybe the urge to purge, the urge to beat yourself up, that kind of can all lead back to the urge to binge, right?
Exactly. That's the whole point. That's why I call it a loop. Such a good point. It's like binge, purge, restrict, beat myself up, seek new programs, get really exhausted, binge, purge. I mean, it's just, it follows in this loop. It's this endless loop. The order doesn't matter. And for some people, the loop can have 3 of those components or 6 of those components or 2 of those components one time. And another time it'll manifest differently, but it's all the same.
Yeah, because as you and I both know, it's so important to make sure you're eating enough in recovery, to make sure you're taking care of yourself. And if you're following all these harmful urges, you're not going to be doing those things. So then it's going to be much harder when the urge to binge comes up to dismiss it. And I know a lot of my approach is focused on dismissing the urges to binge. Well, of course, eating adequately as well. But I love that you bring up that that's not the only harmful urge that you're dealing with.
Yeah. And the thing that I want to say is that it's all totally human. This whole cycle doesn't just happen for people who are binge eaters. It can happen in any number of areas in life because we all have human brains, and human brains are really good at forming habits. And then human brains are also really good at looking for danger. And so we're going to fixate on what we're doing wrong. We're going to fixate on comparing ourselves to how we measure up. We're going to replay things over and over again. That's just what a brain does. And the thing is, of course, with food, there are so many layers to this because of all that patterning. So we've got this loop going, and the trick is just to learn to step out of the loop at any time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get to talking about how to step out of that loop. I also want to mention, too, that it's all just so deeply habitual. Like, even if you do identify with some of these urges, like, oh, this is me, or this is what I really want, maybe if you're identifying with them and really feeling like those are your true thoughts, at some point it does become just so deeply ingrained. Do you agree?
Oh, I totally agree. That's why people don't see that it's even part of the urge, because it just feels like, well, that's just what I do. It's a fact, even though it's actually not a fact. It's just a habit, and it's thoughts you've been believing. And what's fascinating is as you start to distance yourself from one part of the loop, then you start to see all the other pieces.
Yeah. And sometimes distancing yourself from the urge to binge is I don't want to say easiest place to start, but maybe the most clear cut, because you can see that's absolutely not what you want to be doing. I mean, yeah, the lower brain makes you feel that way sometimes, but you can step back and, okay, that behavior is really harming me. But whereas like this urge to diet or focus on your weight or overthink your food, you may feel like, okay, that's what I really need to do.
Right. These are healthy action steps.
Yeah. And maybe if at one point it was that, maybe that's how it started for you. Like, I'm going to try to be healthier. And okay, it's totally innocent. It makes sense, but it spiraled out of control. It led to problems for you. It became habitual. It is no longer serving you.
Exactly. And again, it can be guised in, well, I just want to be healthier, or I just, I need more energy, so I have to follow this plan. And that's not to say that people shouldn't find formulas that work for them that give them more energy. That not at all. But it's, like part of it can be guised in that way. Like it can seem innocent enough, but then it turns into a fixation and perfectionism and micromanaging food, which then leads to urges to binge. And all roads point back there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what the coaching, the one-on-one coaching and group coaching is so good for, is to kind of help you find what is your true, like, wise voice in all of this, because you have all these urges, you have all these desires to do these things that are harming you, but you also want to be healthy. You want to find your own formula for eating. So you do need to learn to connect with that higher part of yourself. How do you sort of help people step out of this cycle in the group and in coaching?
Yeah, great question. I mean, that's the thing. That's the power of coaching, right? Because I have a human brain, but I am not inside of my clients' brains. So it's very easy for me to see what their very, very healthy human brains are doing. I can see when it's not just urges to eat, it's the urges to eat and then beat yourself up and then fixate on weight. And so starting to untangle that and point out the loop and then help clients to expect and allow all of those aspects of the urge loop to come so that they start to anticipate all of the facets of it. And then they're not taken by it. They become onto their brains more and more. So that's a big piece of it. And of course, as I've said so many times on this podcast, but it bears repeating every time, it's about also allowing for imperfection, allowing for it to be messy, expecting that you're going to catch yourself sometimes long after the loop's been spinning for a while, and you might have engaged in several parts of it already, or long after you've already binged again because you said, well, screw it, I blew it, I might as well. And it's all okay. Treating all of that as a learning moment and breathing into it and naming it and seeing all of the ways that you benefit no matter where you catch yourself in the loop to not binge. and then celebrating every little catch, celebrating every bit of awareness, sharing that with people. So in the group, right? Like people post all the time in the learning moments thread or in the wins thread, things that they've discovered, ways that they've caught themselves sooner. And as we celebrate each time, that feeds on itself. That creates a different type of loop, a loop of winning, a loop of celebrating, a loop of doing what you really want for yourself.
Yeah, it's like building new grooves in your brain because that loop is well ingrained and you're going to go down it if you don't have that awareness, if you don't have that sort of ability to step back and say, okay, this is just what my brain is doing and this is not what I truly want. And once you realize that, you can sort of substitute new behaviors. And then those behaviors start to become habitual and then you have healthy loops going in your life.
That's right. Exactly. And to anyone listening, maybe you can think about healthy loops that you've created. Maybe you've established a morning routine or an evening routine where you're meditating and journaling and it's just so automatic. Or maybe you have a morning workout routine, or you always drink tea at a certain time and look out the window and contemplate things, and you built that habit loop. So these loops are often super beneficial. And that's why the brain is so amazing, right? Because once it becomes routinized, then it goes into the habit loop and it's very automatic. But we want to get this particular binge urge, like that whole habit loop, we want to make it quiet and we want you to step out of it so that all those net negatives that you're dealing with start to fade away and you can get all the net positives of a life binge free.
Yeah. Because, gosh, it's taking up so much of your time right now. Just think of all the time you're putting into binging and then all the urges to beat yourself up and then to start a new plan and feel like you have to do everything perfectly. This is taking up so much in your life. And Julia and I have talked on the podcast before about how much you get back when you stop binging, how much your life improves. And when you focus on those benefits, it's going to help you solidify the new loops, the new behaviors that are truly serving you.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe we could wrap up by talking about maybe a specific example of how someone can step out of that loop just at a certain point, or what points do you find the most sticky or the most common for people to get caught up in? And then how do you remove yourself from that?
Well, I think often it starts with catching it after the fact. So, I know everybody wants to think, well, I learn about allowing urges and then I'm free and that's it. But often what happens is, a person will have what I call a learning moment where maybe they'll eat some extra food or they'll binge and then they're starting to beat themselves up and they'll say things like, yeah, but I can't treat this as a learning moment and I can't be kind to myself because if I do, then I'm just going to keep engaging in this behavior. And that's where I, as coach, will step in and say, actually, it's exactly the opposite. Because when you fixate on beating yourself up and compensating and restricting, you're going to get more and more and more of what you don't want. And so we step in and then we say, okay, so what went well? What didn't go well? What will I do differently here? So then the next time something like that happens and you start to eat a little bit more than you've planned, and then you start to freak out about it and say, oh my God, there I go again. I must be broken. You can catch it and say, oh, I see what's going on here. This is just part of the urge loop and nothing's gone wrong. I just ate some extra food and I can stop now and go me. I did it. And then there's going to be discomfort and you let that discomfort move through you. The discomfort around being imperfect, the discomfort around maybe, breaking some arbitrary plan that you set up, and you just breathe through it. And then you celebrate. And then later you notice, oh my goodness, I didn't binge and I didn't beat myself up. And now I get all of these benefits. Go me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think fundamentally it's about developing that awareness, understanding your habits, understanding how the human brain works. And yes, there may be practical strategies that people can use at different points. And, you can work on that in coaching and figure out what works for you uniquely at different points in the loop. But I do think fundamentally that awareness is so important.
Absolutely. Again, that's why, I think it's so important that we're talking about this urge loop, because it's having the awareness that, okay, my urges may not just show up as urges to binge, but it might be urges to restrict, or it might be this fixation on micromanaging details and expecting it to have a perfect outcome, those things. And then if you're hearing this and any of this rings true, then just add that to the things that you're going to be expecting and allowing.
Yeah, and I'm sure that listeners also can relate this to other parts of their life because our brain is so habitual. It is loopy, I guess,
Totally.
It gets in loops, it gets in patterns, and it's always looking for danger and it's always looking for what could go wrong. So this is something that you can use not only in recovery, but well beyond that in the rest of your life.
Absolutely. And that's the most powerful thing about this work is that, as we free ourselves from binging, all of a sudden we use those tools in every area of life. And I always say it's just the tip of the iceberg because once you're free of binging, there's nothing that you can't do. And when you see, oh, I can allow this discomfort and let it move through me, I can do it in other areas too.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Thank you so much, Julie, for coming to share this. I really like the idea of the urge loop. I think it gives people a visual to think about how one behavior is spiraling into another and then into another, and it kind of leads back to binging. So having people see the whole cycle is just very important, and I think it will really help everyone here get a better handle on it and just step out of that loop.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Thanks for having me. It's really great to talk about this.
As you go through this week, try to recognize your own urge loops and use what you've learned today to increase your awareness and your ability to break out of harmful cycles. If you're interested in learning more about the group, you can go to brainoverbinge.com/group. You can sign up anytime and stay as many months as you need. The group calls are weekly, and you can also get support on the forum from Julie and other group members on a daily basis. Here is what one group member recently had to say. In August of 2020, I enrolled in the group forum and calls with Julie. It was the first call with Julie, a call that talked about making a commitment that really got me. I told myself I would make that commitment to myself for 1 whole year. No matter what happened along the way, I would stay committed to the program. She went on to list all the wins that she's made in the group, which included letting go of restriction, letting go of the dieting mindset and one last time thoughts, finding a formula for eating that works for her, learning that binge eating doesn't help with any emotions, and she's also learned to allow urges, visualize herself overcoming difficult situations, and celebrate her success. She said, I began to write the date in my Google Notebook app on my phone, and I would choose an emoji and celebratory saying to go along with any binge-free day. Soon, I had days and days of emojis and fun little celebratory sayings. I have so much more energy, and there is an openness in my life and in my relationships. I still have plenty of things to work on, but the best thing is that I trust all of this will come. I am not afraid anymore that I will be stuck forever in the vicious cycle of binges. I am grateful for all that I've learned. Thank you, Catherine, for your course. Your advice and answers were always so gentle and non-judgmental. Thank you, Julie, for all of your invaluable lessons and for always making me laugh and creating a community of people that really cared for one another. The both of you and the Brain Over Binge program have been the key to my recovery. I really appreciate you sharing this testimony with us. And thank you to all of you for being here for this episode. Again, you can go to brainoverbinge.com/group to learn all about the group. And also you can go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe to see other options for help like the Brain Over Binge course and one-on-one coaching in addition to the group. I look forward to talking to you again next time. I always want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.